Welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast, featuring inspiring interviews with Etsy shop owners, hosted by Ijama Elazu.
Hi, and welcome to the Etsy Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Ijama, and I thank you for joining me for another episode. And this week, I have a special guest on. His name is Jake Phillips, and he's the CEO of Whatify. And if you're asking what that is, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And Jake, thank you so much for being my guest, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's really my pleasure to be here.
Great. So before we start, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So prior to me becoming CEO of Whatify, I started most of my career working in the public sector, largely in education, in public education, and most of my roles were around data analytics and strategy. And in the public sector, and I'm sure sort of this is common knowledge, like there's not a lot of information, or the information is not used effectively to make decisions that impact students' lives or impact citizens' lives. Mm-hmm. So in my work in the public sector, I sort of was inspired, and I thought, we need to do a better job at making sure that data and information should be used for good. Mm-hmm. And used to improve the lives of people, small businesses, and our society. So it was this very spirit, this passion that really got me inspired to work for Whatify, because Whatify is all about adding value to small business owners' businesses. It's making accessible some of the tools that were once only accessible to big businesses, corporations like Google and Amazon, but democratizing that for small business owners like all the great sellers on Etsy.
Oh, great. Okay. So now the big question, which I'm sure somebody is asking, is what is Whatify?
Yes, of course. So Whatify is a tool for Etsy sellers that provides A/B testing to help Etsy sellers answer this question. And that question is, which one of my image listings should be the primary image if I want to increase sales in my shop? And you might be asking, okay, what is A/B testing? Well, A/B testing, otherwise known as split testing, is really just a way to answer a question. Mm-hmm. And in this case, that question is, which one of my photos should be my primary photo? And sort of the core to what A/B testing is about, it's about trying things out. Mm. It's about, let's look at this image. Now let's put in this image. Which one of these images drives traffic more effectively to your shop? So that's exactly what we're doing at Whatify. We are, you sign in, you give us access to, you authorize your shop to your Whatify account, and you begin your test on your image listing, on your Etsy listings. Mm-hmm. What we do is every 4 hours, we randomly switch your first two photos for a given listing. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, we are observing the amount of traffic that each one of those photos brings into your site. Now you might think, oh, I could do this on my own. I could just sort of like switch in and out photos kind of haphazardly and calculate the results on my own. But the key to a successful A/B test, and the key to what makes Whatify powerful, is that we're running these switches every 4 hours for about 3 weeks. We need to collect a lot of data to ensure that the information we are getting is robust, so the recommendations we provide to you are as accurate as possible. And we're proud to say that the recommendations that we deliver to Etsy sellers are on average increasing their sales by 10%. So that's a really long-winded kind of broad overview of what Whatify does and how it increases sales. But if you take away anything from that, I would say take away the following: is Whatify is easy and automatic, mm-hmm. and on average it increases your sales by 10%.
Okay. So, of course, that's something every Etsy seller wants. So, just to put it in context, if a seller has two different pictures of the same item, what you're saying is that based on certain factors, and we with our own eyes can't really tell what those factors are, it's possible that a particular image will attract more clicks and then thus more sales than another one. And so what your app does is it tests between two images per submitted listing, I guess, and determines which one is performing better. And then a user, so an Etsy seller, can look at these stats and then determine which one to then use as the primary picture, which would be the thumbnail.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And to your first point, yeah, oftentimes when a user is trying to choose between what should be their thumbnail, what should be their primary photo, it's often a toss-up in their mind between that first photo or that second photo or potentially a third photo. However, when we run tests on these sort of toss-up cases, we find that often there's a clear image that is far superior in driving traffic to the Etsy seller's shop.
Really?
And now, yeah, so it's pretty surprising because you kind of, you think this should be sort of easy, like I know what's appealing to me. But I think a lot of it comes from the fact that everyone's context is different. So some people are looking at it during the day. Some people are looking at a listing when they're in a bad mood. Some people are looking at a listing when they're in a good mood. And there's just so much variability across people, across situations, that it's just so hard to kind of be truly objective when you're trying to evaluate your photos on your own. So we really sort of take the subjectivity out of it, and we applied essentially just a scientific method as a means to distill recommendations for you that will drive traffic to your shop and increase your sales.
So is it possible that two sellers selling the same type of product and representing them in similar ways, for one seller a particular representation of that product that's essentially the same as the one the other person has, will have a different preferred I don't know what to call it, like preferred feature photograph than the other seller? So I guess what I'm asking is, like, say everyone who sells scarves, will everyone end up having the same type of primary picture that performs better than others, or will there be variations from seller to seller?
That's a very interesting question. We recently did this sort of broad analysis of all of our tests to see, hey, are there any, as you mentioned, like tricks, rules that a seller could follow to always have sort of the best image no matter what? Is there a formula? And sort of to your point, if there was a formula, then everyone's photos would sort of look the same.
Yeah.
But what we found was there's really not much of a formula. There were very few, if any, sort of photo characteristics that systematically led to more appealing photos. And I think that's really because, as I said, everyone's shop is different. Yeah. So a certain type of photo that might work in a listing in, a shop with scarves might work a little bit differently in a shop with hats. And there's just so much individuality across Etsy shops. And I think that's sort of why this sort of homogeneity, we're not finding that. We're finding that individual photos, like recommendations, are really individualized. Okay. And that's why Whatify is great, because it's a recommendation just for you, and it's proven on your shop rather than a broad recommendation to all Etsy sellers.
Okay. And that's good to know because then, and I think you probably realize why I was asking is, well, if everyone's listing is going to end up looking the same, well, not like Amazon. Amazon uses one product photo for all their listings, but if everyone has to use the same kind of styling for their pictures, then it might take something away from that individuality. So it's good to know that there are variables and variations, and so everyone doesn't end up looking exactly the same.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, like, you're more attracted to the thing that stands out. I feel like everyone is to a certain extent. So I think we haven't run a test on this, but I'm sure if we sort of tried to identify, hey, let's just look at images that stand out, that look different from the background, I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually something that is highly associated with increased traffic or increased sales. So yeah, it's good that we're not finding that sort of general photos are the ones that work. But I think it also makes sense given just the way the eye tends to gravitates towards things that stand out, that appear different from the rest.
Okay, good. Okay, so now on a practical level,
Sure.
somebody is listening and they want to take Whatify for a test drive. Where do they go? Do they go to Etsy and go to the apps section, or do they go to Whatify.com?
You can either go to the app section of Etsy and type in Whatify, or an easier way is just type in Whatify.com into your browser. You hit sign up for free, and they'll ask you to authorize your Etsy shop. We only ask for the bare minimum of authorizations, only the sort of the basic data we need to run our tests.
Okay.
Once you authorize, you can start your experiment on as many or as few of your Etsy listings as you'd like.
Okay. So if someone has a shop with hundreds of listings, do you advise them to test just a handful, and then if they see trends, use that across other listings? Or is it necessary to eventually work your way through all your listings?
Yeah. So we do not advise people to take a subset or a handful and then apply those recommendations to the remainder of their listings, because as you said, there's just so much variation where you wouldn't even think there would be. So we encourage everyone to test all their listings on their Etsy shop. Of course, in certain cases where you have one photo image, it's the right one, you don't want to be switching your photos in and out. No, we would never suggest you test that image, that listing. But in general, we say the more the better. And we don't charge you per listing, so it's not any, it's not gonna. There's no sort of incentive for us to be giving that sort of advice.
Okay, and how does the charging work then? Is it a flat fee, like a monthly rate?
So the way it works is when you first begin a test, you get 20% of our recommendations for free. If you want the remainder of your recommendations and the ability to run additional tests on additional listings and additional photos beyond that, you have to sign up for a 1 month or a 6 month subscription. The way that the subscription pricing works is it's actually dependent on a shop's size and sort of how much traffic they bring in. And the reason we do this is because we found when we were thinking through sort of how our pricing model is going to work, we realized if we charged a flat fee, we would be pricing out some of the smallest or the smaller Etsy shops. And those are the folks that we think need our service the most. Those are the folks that we're really in this to help. So by charging a scaled or dynamic pricing model, we're able to offer a really low price to small shops, as low as $5 a month.
Okay.
And sure, we recoup some of those costs on some of the really big shops,
Okay.
but we always make sure this is the biggest thing we make sure that the value we add to your shop far, far, far exceeds the price we charge you. And since we're running these tests and we have this live data, we can actually tell you the dollar value that our tests provide to your shop. So
really?
yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So so then based on how many or the shop size, you or the Whatify app will dynamically immediately tell a seller how much their I don't know if I should call it enrollment or membership, how much it's going to cost them, and then they can decide if they want to go for 1 month or 6 months and then start.
So yeah, pretty much. It's not immediate. What we do first is we first start collecting. We first want to begin running a test.
Okay.
Because remember how I said that we never want the price we charge you to be anywhere near the value our tests provide to you.
Yes.
So we first start running the test to calibrate that number to see,
right.
how much value are we going to be able to provide this shop? And then we determine the pricing based upon that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So a seller goes into their Etsy shop, goes to the Etsy app or Whatify.com and authorizes Whatify. What's the first thing they do? Pick a listing to use or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So go ahead and select your first listing.
We have an option to either select all your listings at once, which about half of people decide to do, or pick and choose which ones you want to select. Then you hit start my test, and the test takes about 4 weeks to complete. You get the results 4 weeks later, and the reason it takes 4 weeks is because we really need to collect a wealth of data to make sure that the results we provide you are accurate.
Oh, that's actually reassuring because I think most of us know that in order to get a good reading or sample, test something, you need to test it for a good amount of time. And even Etsy recommends, when you look at your stats, look at a minimum of 30 days, not, yesterday and today.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say, like, when Etsy tells you to look at your stats, look at them over 30 days, because that's what we're doing. We're ensuring that we're looking at it across a long enough period so that any random variation that occurs in 1 week or another sort of works its way out, because it's very easy in the very short term to mistake a short-term trend or some sort of blip for a true result. And we want to ensure that we're not capturing luck, we're capturing actual evidence and actual results, and our recommendations to you are a reflection of that.
Oh, okay. I like that. You're not capturing luck.
Yeah.
Okay. So then a seller gets this information. Do you, or does the app rather, in any way modify their pictures or their listings, or you're just accessing information?
No, so when we're running the tests, we're actually switching the photos in and out on your shop.
Okay.
Because we are collecting that data in real time to see, which one of these photos is getting more clicks. Okay. And then when you get the results, you have the option to click a button and we will implement all of our recommendations for you. So you'll see a list. You'll see a list of all your listings, and it'll say something like, switch it to this photo, or keep it at that photo. If you switch it to this photo, it will increase your sales by 11%. And so on and so forth. And then at the top, it says, would you like us to apply recommendations? You click yes, and we will we will automatically implement the recommendations that we sent to you on your Etsy shop. So if you have 500 listings, you don't have to go in there one by one and select all your listings. And swap them before.
Okay. Now, what if someone's photography isn't great? Is the app able to say, look, none of your pictures are good. Can you need to take better pictures that showcase your products better, or the app will just determine the best of the worst?
Yeah, funny question. I would say the app can't say you're bad at photography.
Okay.
And that probably wouldn't be a good sort of customer service technique.
Well, no, but
no, I'm just kidding. But no, you're right that we can only tell you which of the photos you've tested is the best. We can't say whether they are sort of generally poor.
Okay.
We can just say their relative performance. That's why I generally give the recommendation, because sometimes people will ask me, when am I ready to use Whatify? And well, my instinct to say, use it all the time. Everyone's ready. And that's true to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I think it's the best to use when you've got a handful of photos that they're done well, and you're just trying to choose among a few that you want to sit as your thumbnails, your primary photo, and it's hard for you to make that decision. That's when Whatify provides the most value.
Okay.
And now we see, and I hear this when I speak to Etsy sellers, that sort of Etsy is fostering a more competitive environment within the application, within the whole website.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I feel that it's more important now than ever to have a thumbnail that stands out, so that when a shopper is shopping for one thing and they see your thumbnail at the top of the page because Etsy's putting it there, they'll be enticed to click on it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Now, do you know if Whatify has any other competitors in this space? Are there any other apps or companies offering something similar?
I'd say it depends on how you define the space. Sure,
Okay.
there are other apps that offer analytical support, whether that's SEO or whether that's helping with tags or pricing.
Mm-hmm.
But Whatify is, for one, the only tool that's providing A/B testing, and secondly, the only service that is using that A/B testing to provide you with recommendations that are scientifically proven to deliver results to your specific shop. A lot of the other services are making inferences based upon broad analyses of overall Etsy environment.
Mm-hmm.
So in my sense, to me, it seems like a lot of SEO is based upon, hey, these general tags work well in the Etsy search engine, but does that work well for your individual shop? It's hard to say. Whatify is different in that we are running our experiment directly on your shop,
Okay.
and those results are for your shop and your shop only. And because of that, we are extra confident about the recommendations that we send you. So short answer is we don't really have competitors that are doing exactly what we're doing.
Okay. All right. And so you mentioned, there are some apps that will help you with, SEO and ranking using, SEO and tags.
Mm-hmm.
Whatify specifically focuses just on listing images. Is there some reason that you decided to just use that as your point of focus to help increase sales?
Yes, the reason we went for listing images is because from Etsy headquarters themselves, they've come out with, in one of their photography guidebooks, there's a stat that says your listing image is the biggest determinant of your listing sales.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just a fact that more so than tags, more so than even price. It is the image itself that is the most important variable in driving traffic to your site. So, to your shop. So we thought, that's the best unit for us to test because it's the one that's most important.
Okay. Oh, that makes perfect sense. I think I know did you read that in that? I think it was like a 14-part photography.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you read all 14 parts?
I did not. I read most of them.
Yeah.
And then we confirmed that with the Etsy folks just to make sure that it wasn't just something they were saying. And they said, yes, it's indeed the truth.
Yes. And I think Etsy sellers are so used to hearing that your pictures are so important. I think every seller who hears that probably rolls their eyes because
I know
you hear it day in and day out, and I think it's necessary to keep repeating it because like you said, and like Etsy said, even over price, your photography will help determine whether or not you get that sale.
Absolutely.
It's just really that important.
And I understand the fatigue, and especially like small business owners, like everyone on Etsy, they have so many things that they're juggling. Yeah. And sometimes it's just the last thing you want to hear is another thing you're not doing right.
Yeah.
So I get that. The good thing about what Whatify provides is it's totally easy and automatic. We're not lecturing you on sort of what you should be doing. Mm-hmm. We're providing you with recommendations that we will implement directly for you. So it's sort of like nothing to worry about. Just sign up and begin a test, and it's really easy as 1, 2, 3. So we want to sort of take the stress out of it and just provide the value.
Okay. Now, so what do you think a good length of time will be to, like, I know that the testing is done or initially over 4 weeks where you assess the data. From a seller's point of view, what's a good amount of time to just set aside and say, I'm going to let my shop go through this whole A/B testing process for all my listings? And I know that will depend on just shop volume, how much each person has. But how do you think a seller can best manage this aspect of just modifying their shop and their listings?
Yeah. So as you said, it's really dependent on individual shops and sort of how much turnover they have and how often they're changing images. But I'll give this general guideline. Okay. The general guideline is that you should run an A/B test on each listing whenever you upload a new image and it's not 100% clear which image is going to be that primary photo, because there's really no downside to running that test in that case. Okay. And then beyond that, we like to say, even if your photos remain static and you're not changing your listings, mm-hmm. you should run a test at least once a year, even if you haven't swapped photos. And that's just because tastes change, things change, and because of that, consumer preferences also change. Okay. And then the last part I would say is whenever you upload a new listing, you should also A/B test your photos then as well.
Okay. Now, is it possible to see a demo if someone wants to just take a look at what Whatify does before jumping in? Where can someone go to look at a demo?
So on our website, we're working on getting sort of more robust demos, but we have a animation and a FAQ and a fun little how it works animation on our homepage. Yeah. But if you'd like more information than that, you can reach out directly to me, and I can provide you with some screenshots and a walkthrough. If any customer wants that, I would be happy to do that. And you can reach out to me via my email, which is jake@whatify.com, or there's a contact us box on the homepage, because I totally get that a lot of times you don't want to try something until you see how it works.
Yes.
So if the information we have on the homepage is not sufficient or you don't feel totally comfortable, just reach out to me and I'll help anyone out.
Okay, great. Well, that's good to know. And I will have Jake's email address in the show notes for this episode in case you don't have a chance to write it down as you're listening. So, Jake, let's talk business person to business person.
Yes.
All right. So you're a CEO and of Whatify, not a, but the CEO of Whatify. And someone is listening right now who is also the CEO of their business. How do you manage your time and how do you set priorities to make sure that you achieve the goals that you've set to accomplish for your company?
That is such a important question, and one that I am always working on getting better at. And I think that number one, that's a huge part of it, is just consistent self-reflection and introspection to ensure that you are always getting better at the things you need to get better at in order to do well for your company. Mm-hmm. But for me, how I go about time management and then the goal setting process is that, well, for one, being the CEO of a small company, you have to wear many hats. I'm not just a big picture guy. I'm also doing a lot of the implementation. So what I tend to do is on Sundays is when I have a little more free time and I can sort of work peacefully. And on Sundays is when I really sit back and think big picture and plan over the week, the next few weeks, or the next few months, and really etch out the individual steps I need to take over the next week to reach those short, medium, and long-term goals. And of course, things come up in the week, and sometimes I can't meet every deadline I set for myself. Yeah. But that's what next Sunday is for me to reset and rethink and take a step back and breathe. So that's generally the way I go about goal setting and managing that while juggling all the responsibilities of being a CEO of a small startup.
Yeah, and I think any Etsy seller who's listening to you right now can completely relate, because for the most part, most of us are, like you said, wearing multiple hats and running different aspects, or responsible for different aspects of our growing businesses, and so it's easy to relate to what you just said. Are there any resources or tools that you find particularly helpful? And it could even be books that you've read that you've found have helped you grow or helped you just become better at organization or running your business, or productivity tools that you use.
Okay, so for tools, I am about the simpler the better generally. So I use really, and this is really low tech nowadays, but I use Google reminders on the calendar. Yeah, you can create these little reminders, and my calendar is just jam packed with reminders. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I use consistently. I also have sort of a project management tool. We use Asana, which is for. Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, it's just another one of those. It's great. It's easy to use for sort of longer term project management. But when it comes to books I've read, now we're going to get a little nerdier, because as I mentioned, I'm really a data nerd when it comes down to it. So I don't know if you've heard of Nate Silver. So Nate Silver was sort of like this elections predictor guru guy. And he came out with this book, I believe it's called, The Signal and the Noise. And what it's all about trying to extract meaning, extract true, valuable data from the wealth of information that is out there in the modern world. as you were saying, like an Etsy seller is bombarded with do this, do that, do this, do that. And it can be so hard to figure out what is that signal, what is real, and what is noise. So I spend a lot of time trying to remain objective and trying to sort of emotionally center myself. So I'm in as good of a place as possible to make the most rational decision for the business. And that's really difficult, and it takes consistent thought and effort, because when you're stressed and there's things coming at you, your emotions can get the best of you.
Yes.
So that's really been sort of guiding to me as I've gone through this process.
Is this a book that Nate Silver wrote, or is it a tool that he's developed?
So it's a book, and it's sort of all about sort of the good and the bad ways that individuals can use information and use data to make decisions.
Oh, okay.
And it might sound really cold and sort of numerical the way I'm speaking about it, but it really has a human quality to it that resonated with me. But of course, I'm weird. I'm like a data guy. That might not resonate with Etsy folks, but still, I think folks, plenty are data people. I don't want to.
Yeah, no, I think it will, only because, like you said, there's so much coming at us. There's, social media, and then not just social media, but, all the different platforms. Well, where should I be? What should I focus on? How much should I be, on social media? How much should I be doing? Then there's blogging. Should I be blogging? Should I be writing? What should I write about? And then, email, who should I be talking to? Exactly. What should I be saying to my mailing list? Should I have a mailing list? I don't have one. There's so much out there. And then, then there's the SEO and the technical parts. And you and I were talking about, just people read, will read an article and then get flustered because, they're going along and then somebody speaks up and says one thing and that throws off their entire balance. And then, it's like, well, what am I doing wrong? What do I need to change? So it's nice to listen to, a voice of reason, if there's, somebody who's teaching how to streamline all of this and make sense of it, because at the end of the day, it really is kind of impossible to try and do everything or keep up with everything.
It is impossible. And another related thing that I've tried to embrace as a small business CEO is sort of just the aspect of uncertainty. And that's something that every Etsy seller faces as well, the uncertainty of you don't know necessarily what tomorrow is going to look like. Yeah. And you can try your best to improve the chances that you will have positive outcomes in the future. And there's a lot you can do to improve those odds. But really, there's still an inherent uncertainty that I feel like it's important to manage and also just have some peace with. And that's something that I've been trying to also grow at throughout this process.
Yeah, and that's good advice. I was going to ask you to give a tip before I let you go, but I think you just gave it.
Well, that's the only one I have, so.
Well, good.
Oh, sleep 8 hours a day. I know that sounds silly because no one does it, but I am such a proponent of sleep. I think it's so important for production, efficiency, and emotional regulation, which drives just better working habits. I think it's vital.
It is, and it's coincidental that you mentioned that, because just this morning I was having a conversation with someone and I said I had stayed up late working the night before because I'm working on this project that I'm trying to get done, and anyone who listens to the podcast probably knows what project I'm talking about because I've been talking about it for a long time. And so I was up late the night before. And so yesterday I just, 8:30 hit and I could not keep my eyes open. And so I went to sleep and I slept. And I remember saying right before I lay down, I thought, you know what, I'm going to set my alarm to wake up after 9 hours and then I can start working again. And I did, and I was so much more productive because I got a good, well, thanks to snooze, I got 9.5 hours.
Wow.
But yes. Yeah. I, even though I didn't need to snooze, I'm just so used to snoozing. So I will still snooze anyway. And so I got 9.5 hours, and I woke up and I was more productive, in those early morning hours than, I was the day before. And so I completely agree with you. Sleep is essential. We just have to get better about organizing our time so that we're not ripping ourselves off of extra sleep time.
I agree completely.
Yeah.
And you deserve that 9.5 hours.
I don't know if everyone would say I deserve it, but I feel like I did. Jake, thank you so much for being my guest on the podcast. And I know you said your email is jake@whatify.com. Is that the best way people can reach you right now if they do have more questions for you or want to get in touch?
Absolutely. That is the best way to reach me. I try to respond within 24 hours, and I usually make that promise. But it's definitely I'm happy to respond to anyone's questions, inquiries, or anything, concerns, directly via email.
Okay. Thank you. And I thank you for spending this time with me and just talking about Whatify and what it does. And I'm excited for where your company is going to go. I'll be watching out and try and take it for a test drive myself too.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking about this, and it was really great talking about sort of small business owners, some of the challenges we face.
Yeah. And I thank you for listening to the podcast. I will be back next week.
Thank you for listening. You can subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, and while you're there, please leave a review too. Visit convome.com to leave a comment or feedback on this episode.